Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay. I always like to introduce myself as Lindsay Geiger, but I recently got married, so my last name is James now. Yay! We did it. So if you are looking for me in the future, I'm very much going as Lindsay James versus Geiger. So that's always something I love to throw in there first and foremost. My business is called Kneading Balance. I've been the owner of that for some time now, but I realized that I really wanted to take it and run with it in regards to sports, which is really where we got that balance part from. And I always like to explain the name of my business first because a lot of people ask how I created it. And it's literally just called Kneading Balance Services. And the kneading part, as massage therapists, we have lots of different techniques that we use, but my favorite technique is the kneading technique. So that was part of my name, and balance is something personally and professionally that I'm always trying to work on, is balance in your life. So I think it's really important to incorporate what you're bringing to the table as well as what you're trying to give to your clients. So that Kneading Balance service name, which was cool. So a little bit about myself. I've been a massage therapist for 8 years. I created a kind of a trifecta program with my clinic where I am a massage therapist, I'm a personal training specialist, and I'm also a certified sports nutritionist. And those were at different parts of my career because I finally started to figure out where my niche was going. And, I started with massage. I knew I wanted to give back to athletes. I'm an athlete myself, so I think that's always really special and important to make sure you match that energy that people are giving out and you're giving it back the same way. So I always think that's really cool to incorporate. And then I realized that as much as massage is good for your clients and athletes and etc., it's also really important to give home care. I think that's something that, unfortunately, there's so many therapists out there that don't give home care anymore. So that personal training specialist program that I took actually took me in a whole different direction of how to give back to my clients, which I love everything since I took that. And then I realized that it still wasn't enough in regards to giving back to my clients, and especially in the sports world, that combination is so important, because unfortunately a lot of athletes don't know how to take care of themselves in a nutritious way, as well as rehab and movement. So I really pushed that in my field of massage and nutrition and fitness, and combined it in a business. And humbly and happily, it's taken me to where I am today, where I've been able to travel the world with athletes, which is really cool. I've worked with professional athletes. I've worked with little grassroots athletes. I've worked with all levels, which I think is also really important. I think the most common question I get when it comes to sports is, how'd you get into it? How'd you get the connections that you have now? But I really do think the most important thing is knowing that your first year out of school, you're not going to go to the Olympics. And I always like to say that because a lot of people have this assumption that the second that you want to get into sports, you instantly have this opportunity. And unfortunately, you go through years of practice to be able to have that capability or that opportunity to actually go. And I have to say that throughout the 8 years that I've been a massage therapist, my dream, and I've always talked about this on podcasts, is that, my dream has always been the Olympics, because I thought that was the top. I thought that was the point or the pinnacle of my career, and I always thought that was like the thing. And I think I had an epiphany last year where I realized that it really isn't the top. And what's the top is your opportunity of giving to whatever athlete you can. And that's what I believe, and that's really what my love for sports really came through and showed me what's possible. And since I've had that epiphany, I've realized that I'm really open to all different types of sports, which I think is cool. in your first couple of years within sports and, graduating, what was the first couple of things that I did? The number one thing I did was I went to conferences like this, and I was just a sponge. I would ask the most ridiculous questions. I would go and I would bug people about modalities that they did, or home care that they would provide an athlete. I would go to hockey games, like local hockey games, and I would watch things like crazy and see what's really happening in the world of sports that, I've been a part of, but I've been an athlete. So I've never been able to pull back and really see the bigger picture. So it was really cool when I first graduated that in 2015, we had the Pan Am Games. So I don't know if any of you watched the Pan Am Games, but thankfully it was in Toronto, and that really took me off by storm. And it was really cool to meet doctors and athletic therapists and physios and chiros of all kinds in all of Ontario and Canada who were volunteering at the same time for a really cool event. And that's when I really figured out, okay, I got to start working on my niche. And, another question I get as a therapist is, how do you figure out your niche? How do you know that you want to get into sports? And I would advise as much as possible to be as open-minded as a therapist. You don't have to start with a niche. You don't have to know exactly as soon as you graduate, this is what I need to do. Because I'm also thankful for all the palliative clients I have, the pregnancy clients that I have before, inter, and post. I'm excited to have the kids that I get to, do different assessments on. And all of those things actually progressively got me to where I am with sports, where I'm confident at any age group to actually work on, which is really cool. One of the big things that I always take away from opportunities of major games that I've traveled to is the big 3 C's. And the first one that I always like to kind of dive into is connections. Now, as much as people explain that connections can be very small and like the massage therapy world, I think it's actually really important to take that and go a little bit deeper and pull out of that perspective of just massage. Because as much as massage is a wonderful kind of realm, when you actually get to meet physios and chiros and osteos, they'll give you a different perspective of how to work with athletes as well. So building those connections is an opportunity to not only grow as a therapist, but also you'll be quite surprised where you see them at other games and they'll recognize you and you'll have a bond. And it's actually really exciting when you get to see them at multiple games throughout the years. And then you'll get to events like this. And I joke about it with a few of the people who work here. And we were joking that people come up to me during this conference and say, "You're Lindsay Geiger, like I follow you," or like I'm a big fan of like how you do your social media for sports, or I see that you traveled to Israel 3 times. How'd you do it? Right? And I'm always happy and honored to be able to share that with you and that journey, because I know that I was a sponge when I was a student, where I would have died to ask those questions, or maybe stomach the ability to have that confidence to even just get into a games, right? So connections as a whole is like the number one thing I would take away from this in regards to sports, is just build your connections, be vulnerable, be a sponge. And it's really beautiful who you can meet throughout the years of your practice, which is cool. The next one I would talk about is really bringing in that commitment. And when I talk about commitment, I feel so strongly about this because I look at it in 2 different ways. And ironically, we're actually talking about it in the panel this morning about commitment. And the first one about commitment is the self-commitment. And that's actually devoting yourself as a therapist to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Because as someone who works in the athletic world, I don't know if some of you were listening to Danielle's speaking kind of presentation as well, but it's a crazy world. Sports, as much as it's wonderful and people think it's fun and it's really thriving and in regards to the opportunities, it is exhausting. There's lots of days where you're starting the day at 6 a.m. and you're ending the day at midnight, and then you have a medical meeting on top of that, and then you have to start again at 6 a.m. Perfect example, I was in Windsor last week for a thing called Life Sports Championships, and if you guys don't know, please look into it because it's amazing. And, my breakfast would start at 5:45, and I think our day would probably end around 9:45, 10 o'clock, and then we'd have a staff meeting, right? And sometimes that's a typical day as a therapist, on top of you going to lunches and meetings and then the competitions, and you're going with the team wherever you go, right? So definitely taking advantage of committing yourself to your own self-care, but also the commitment to your athletes, making sure that they're committed to the nutrition, the rehab. One major thing that I was so motivated to do when I became a therapist is give back, because there wasn't a lot of rehab when I was an athlete, and I could never actually get the help that I needed, nor did I know what I needed in regards to food. So that was something that I think is really important when it comes to commitment. The last one I always forget: connections, commitment, and community. Yes, community. So community is another one that I find really great to know, because there's so many communities within sports. And when you know the right people and you build that kind of foundation blocks as a massage therapist, you grow and evolve. And what's exciting is that when you build a community of people you can refer to, it's so much fun to have those conversations and build that empire of opportunities. So I always think communities can be Facebook, right? Social media is always great for that. Conferences are great for that as well. So just looking at those as opportunities, I think, is super important. Now, when we talk about the climb of sports, I think a lot of people, like I said, think that you can just get to the Olympics in the first year. And for me, it was a progression of connections. Within my first couple of years, I did the Pan Am Games. And then I worked for a clinic who, at the time I didn't know, but he just got a job for being the massage therapist for the Calgary Flames. So he gave me that platform to meet Team Canada. And then we went worldwide that way with hockey, which is really exciting. But this is where I can emphasize connections are so, so important. And this can also be things like you don't even want to do, right? For me, I am more of like a hockey and a rugby type of girl. Those are sports that I've played my entire life. But the hardest thing is that there's opportunities out there like artistic gymnastics. And I really didn't want to go because that's not my thing. But luckily, I met this fabulous woman there, and she was in this fluorescent orange shirt, and it said Maccabi Canada on it. And we got talking, and little did I know she was interviewing me, and she was watching me practice. And she asked me after the end of the day, she said, would you be interested in going to Israel to represent Canada for the Maccabi Games? And since then, I've been able to go 3 years in a row. So there are circumstances that you may not want to be a part of because you're not interested in that sport. But I can promise you the opportunities that you can have just based on doing something that you love and build that community can actually be really, really beautiful within this realm of the profession. If anyone has any questions during, like after this, if you have any questions, I can give out cards, etc. My social media is also kneading.balance. If you want to direct message me, I always have mentorship programs, which is always fun. So I currently have 35 people who I'm mentoring and I'm taking to different games, and I'm able to give them that opportunity of potential to get hands-on with practice, which I feel exciting. And yeah, feel free. Don't be a stranger. Please ask away if you guys have any questions. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good day.